Hey, it's Alenka from Embracing Nutrition. I am going to run through a stool sample report with you today, just so you can have a look at, so you understand what to expect, and also why you choose to do it in the first place. So I'm going to share my screen, and we can get going. Okay, hopefully you're seeing this. So this is a sample report. So obviously, once you order a stool test, you'll receive a test kit that will have all the information and instructions of what to do, where to send it, etc. And once you do all of that, you will receive a report very much like this. So a really nice thing about this is it's really easily laid out and easy to understand in terms of its color coding and just the way it's laid out. So as a starting point, you would get a summary, which is this page here. And the really nice thing is they've sort of categorized it into these 5 key areas of digestive health. So we've got things like our maldigestion. So are we actually breaking down our food properly? We then have inflammation when we look into the gut lining. So have we got inflammatory bowel conditions going on? Is there any just gut barrier dysfunction? And by that could be things even to do with like our skin health, even our blood vessel health, things like that. Any sort of barrier-esque condition. We also want to identify what's going on in the gut barrier. We also look into dysbiosis, which is looking into the balance of bacteria, metabolite imbalance, so short-chain fatty acids, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail shortly, and then infection. So is there a parasite? Is there yeast, etc. So I'm going to show you through, it's a very snapshot view into the stool report. Obviously, when you get your own, we would go into this in a lot more depth. But just to give you that quick insight into what to expect, this would be your first page. So straight away, you'll be able to identify your key areas of concern and key areas that are working well. So they do that with a traffic light color coding system. So green would be it's working well. Yellow is, okay, we want to start thinking about that. And red is, yeah, it's high priority. Let's work on it straight away. So let's have a look into the actual report. So as a starting point, we start from a bird's eye view. If you like, we're looking into the amount of bacteria in your gut. So is there an overgrowth? So maybe it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Maybe we're really not breaking food down properly and that allows for extra fermentation, etc. We'd be able to explore that. And on the flip side, we look into actually, is there enough bacteria? Is there a deficiency? So ideally, as a starting point, we can then even just explore that. Just why is there a deficiency? Why is there an overgrowth, etc. And then we can move forward. So we then look into dysbiosis patterns, so just the general sort of balance of bacteria, which is what we would then next look into. We have that represented on obviously this very colourful graph here. Ideally, we're always aiming to sort of be in that sort of green area, but it just allows us to then start asking even more insightful questions. You know, a lot of what goes on in our gut is based on obviously our diet and also our lifestyle. So things like medications can disrupt our microbiome. Same with alcohol intake or the foods we choose to eat, even things down to our stress and exercise. So we can then really start to explore what's driving the imbalance in the first place. You know, what's driving an overgrowth within specific groups of bacteria, which is what we can identify here, etc. So really, really fascinating starting point. We then get to look into those specific areas in a bit more detail. So we look into actually the breakdown of food. Have we got a lot of protein in the stool, which we don't want to have? Have we got a lot of fecal fat? So are we just not absorbing our fats properly, etc.? We can identify all of those as a starting point. We then look into inflammation and immunology health. So is there an immune response happening from the gut? Maybe you're someone who has a diagnosis of Crohn's disease, or maybe you're exposing yourself to some sort of allergens. Maybe you're noticing you can't really tolerate as many foods as maybe you used to, or you're sort of having to restrict your diet quite a lot. Maybe you're exposed to, you know, other sort of barrier conditions like I spoke about earlier. So maybe skin conditions like eczema, even things like psoriasis have been connected to also gut barrier dysfunction. So we can really start to piece that puzzle together, which is super, super beneficial because then we can be very targeted in that repair work that we might want to put in. Another really nice aspect of this is we have a PCR technology, which looks into the DNA of bacteria, so just a general head count basically is what it is. And this is really amazing. We can sort of go through with a fine-tooth comb, you know, have we got enough beneficial bacteria as a starting point? Where is the imbalance specifically lying? Do we need to really work on diversity of food and fiber? Or do we in fact just need to work on actually promoting the better breakdown of food? We can really start to piece that puzzle together. This test also does measure gas producers. So if you are someone who suffers with a lot of bloating or just distension, or even motility issues, so maybe you're prone to constipation or diarrhea, we can really start to explore why that's happening. And then the sort of latter section is where we then start to look into possible infections. Then we look into the culture methodology. So culturing is basically measuring sort of the strength of bacteria. And this is where we can start to see if anything that perhaps is pathogenic or problematic would grow out from this point. So completely unique to you and whatever's going on in your gut. And if it is a potential pathogen, or maybe it's going to drive symptoms, it will come up in yellow, or it can even come up in red, depending on obviously what comes up. So this is amazing and very, very specific. So we can then really identify what else is going on, what could be driving symptoms that maybe don't seem gut related in the first place. So for instance, in this scenario, Klebsiella is present, which is a very inflammatory strain of bacteria, especially if it's quite strong. So if you're someone who deals with inflammation in other areas, and that could be anything, that could be, to do with immunity, or it could be to do with even heart health. Maybe we want to piece that puzzle a bit more in terms of, is there an inflammatory bacteria here that could be driving that? Likewise, is there a yeast overgrowth? Is there a yeast infection which can give off sort of a plethora of symptoms? So you can get things like fatigue or brain fog. Maybe you have recurrent thrush or UTIs. We can really, really get down to, okay, what's going on? What's driving that? And then we can be super targeted with our approach. So yeah, fantastic section in my opinion. They then also do test for parasites. So we look into, is there a parasite as a starting point? Maybe you're someone who has been on holiday and never felt quite right since. Maybe there's a parasite that's actually behaving in a way that, could be misinterpreted as something else. We can really start to tweak everything and figure out what's going on for you. We then have an option here to be even more specific. So just doing the stool test is sort of everything we've just looked at, plus further sensitivities on parasites, which is also using PCR technology. And we also measure things like occult blood. So that in itself is the GI effects. That is the stool report, which is very comprehensive, and in itself is probably enough information as a starting point. However, there are scenarios where maybe you want to go down and explore certain symptoms further. So we have options for things like zonulin, which is an add-on more so specific to cases of autoimmunity, or just, conditions associated with gut permeability. Maybe we'd like to add on zonulin for that. We also have an option for macroscopic testing. So if someone, if you've seen something in the stool specifically and you'd like someone to identify that, we can absolutely do that. There's also specific bacterial strains, so like H. pylori, which is very commonly associated with reflux and GERD. Maybe you've previously had that. We can explore if it's still there or not. These are typical, very pathogenic bacteria as well. So we have things like Campylobacter and Clostridium. So if you, again, have been on holiday, maybe it's not a parasite, but maybe you've sort of not felt right since, and you've had sort of onset of acute diarrhea, things like that, we can really explore, okay, what is the specific infection that we're dealing with? So that in itself is the stool report. So I'm just going to flip back to the first page. But the main target for the test is to get answers, to find out what's going on. And the stool test is probably one of the most commonly used tests, just because it's a key foundation of health. So we really want to explore what's going on in the gut, because a lot of things can actually manifest in other areas, but actually it does stem from the gut as a starting point. So it's very, very common that you might find you'd be using a stool test, at least just to see as a starting point what is there that maybe we can explore further. So that's the GI effects in a very quick nutshell, but hopefully it gives you that insight into what to expect to see. And then also, maybe it's exciting to see the answers that you could also get. And then, we can be very, very specific in how we then move forward. So I will leave that there for you, and I'll see you in the next one.